So, pretty stark realities that we face at the crossroads. And I think this, we don't want to leave this conversation. We thought it would be very helpful right away to bring up a few of our CEOs to give a perspective on the crossroads and to really think. We've given them some questions to ponder on. We're not asking to answer all the questions, but we said, how does Gail Giraud's story resonate with you? What has changed since New York, since Amalgamated? What are some of the technology trends in your region that we need to think about? What are the new questions that we're working with? And what are some of the greatest opportunities that we have for values-based banking in the next period of time? So I'd like to invite, just come on up and find a chair. First, Brian Argret, CEO and Director of City First Bank, Washington, D.C. And I think it's good to give them an applause as they come up. From Latin America, we have Marco Escobar, CEO from Banco Sol, Bolivia. Welcome, Marco. From Europe, we have Charlotte, and I'm Skovgaard. I always have a challenge with the name. I have CEO of Merkur Bank. Charlotte is also a member of a think tank that I can't pronounce as well. From Africa, we have Kwame Owusu-Boateng, CEO from Opportunity. And from Asia Pacific, we have Paul Thomas coming here from ISAF Small Finance Bank, joining us from India. So, we've got, don't have all the mics, but we have a few mics, so we're going to be passing mics around. And I'll just start with you, Brian. Go ahead, your perspective.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, amazing to be here. So I took up one of your questions about what's different from when we were together a year ago in New York. And I want to touch on just four things and give some questions for us to consider over the next couple of days. One of them really is around economic situation. And again, this affects all values-based banks, but I'm speaking from a North American perspective. So we had a year ago concerns about where our economy would land. Would we have a recession? The U.S. economy has done fairly well, if you will. Soft landing, some might say. Interest rates have come down. Inflation has come down. Interest rates have not yet come down. Lots of questions about what will happen there. And I think there's a sense that it's a good situation overall. But the real question is, well, is it equitably distributed for the communities that we address? So I think that's something we have to think about. Politically, the second point, wow, all over the world, major elections taking place, I think the most in history that are taking place around the world. In the US, we have a quite contentious presidential election with diametrically opposed perspectives that have major implications for our communities. Again, my bank is particularly focused on the triple bottom line, but the social aspects. So you'll see my comments will be directed towards some of those things. And with that completely different perspective, we've seen what policy really does do. So coming from a year ago, I'll touch on one area, one of them being out of the court system. So we've had a DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion backlash in the courts. Very, very serious. We've had a Supreme Court case against Harvard University back in June that race-conscious admissions would be banned. We've had a federal judge in July of this past year strike down provision for a U.S. government Small Business Administration 8A program that is focused on minority and veteran business owners for over 50 years, stood for 50 years, and that's in disarray. And now we've had a lawsuit by the same litigants or backed by the same litigants as the Harvard case, addressing finance, nonprofit finance, providing small business loans, $20,000 to black women entrepreneurs, right? And that is now under threat. Now, flipping it around to the positive, because there's the silver lining, we have, again, out of policy, tremendous financing. Again, not enough to solve the problems that we saw here around climate justice, though, in the United States. We have $27 billion coming out of the US government in the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And what I'm particularly interested there is that there's a strong focus on communities that have been historically underserved or left behind in climate justice. And I believe this is a phenomenal opportunity for GABV member banks in the States to access and to direct this to communities that have been harmed or left behind. And so that includes MDIs, CDFIs, and value-based banks. One third point, regulatory environment. So you can't have a conversation with bankers and not talk about the second, third, and fourth largest bank failures in US history happening since we were last together. Obviously, you all know Silicon Valley Bank. That is, the total of those three is over $500 billion in assets that went down with those three banks. Now, again, you could say it's isolated, but the regulatory response, which I think is the thing we will need to talk about, is increased scrutiny and thus increased cost, a lot of focus on CRE, commercial real estate, on governance and risk mitigation there, and then, of course, on fintech partnerships, which already had started scrutiny in the regulatory level, but certainly has stepped up due to some challenges. And with that, we now have U.S. enforcement actions, major enforcement actions at a 7-year high. So that you can see how the regulatory response reacts. The last thing, we've been talking about AI, that's every banker's mind. I'll take a little bit, two things. One, last year, again, since we last met, overall IT investment is down pretty dramatically for new technology companies in the US, so this sounds different than what we've been hearing, down from about $6 billion to $4.3 billion. So that's a major drop, right? Almost 30% drop, yet, where's it up? AI and information security, things that bankers are focused on very much, and so we know that's important. So here are the questions the 4 takeaway questions that I think we may ponder over the next days. One, we know that higher regulatory technology, and we haven't talked about talent yet, costs, are gonna drive scale and the need for consolidation. So where do we land as value-based banks? I think it's important that there's the opportunity for clear differentiation. I can't say the word this morning, even with my espresso, and that we need to fall on the right side of that. I think second, there's this tremendous US government currently interest around climate justice, and I think we have to seize that and make that pay dividends for our society. Third, there's tremendous pressure on diversity, equity, and inclusion, really a backlash to the worldwide movement behind the George Floyd murders years ago, a few years ago, but it's a backlash. It's swung the other way. I wonder if that'll happen with climate justice in the United States, and what are we gonna do about it? And then finally, if we're talking AI, there'll be so many benefits that we'll discuss and need, and we have to do it and have to do it now, even if we don't know why we're gathering data. But with AI specifically, I think as values-based banks, the one question we have to ask is, what about the potential for the perpetuation of the existing systemic discriminatory practices or harm that occurs from either bad data or documenting existing purposes? We need to think about that when we hand over to artificial intelligence some of the decisioning that, again, has had these same outcomes in the past.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you. We'll go immediately to Marco, share your perspective from Latin America.
Marcelo, Tom, thank you. Not Marco. Thank you. Good morning to all. First of all, many of you knows Celia Cruz, the deceased Cuban singer. Yes, I'm pretty sure you know who was she. And she said many times about her English that apologize, but my English is not very good looking. It's the same for me. My English is not very good looking. Then, in that sense, I wrote many of the ideas that I share with you in this morning. First of all, in Latin America and in many countries in the world, in recent years, not only in the last one, deep nationalist feelings has been reborn in an important way over the concept of globalization that destroyed them in the past. These feelings, I think, have gained strength in many places and also in Latin America, LA. But this continent still does not know, for sure, what it wants to be when it gets grown up. LA wants to have European social security, the consumption levels of America, and the technology that Asia has. But it does not invest enough in education and values. Meanwhile, USA looks inward again and with public investment is building its own production capacities to prevent them from continuing to migrate to China. On the other hand, LA wants to start seeing what it does produce with added value and to whom does it sell? To America, to Europe, to China, to Russia? It don't know yet. But this continent, Europe, and those countries, China and Russia, have developed important links with LA in the recent years. But beyond that, LA still has deep challenges in issues of corruption and development of values aspects related to gender equality and ESG concepts. Beyond complying with them or making them comply under coercion or sometimes fashion. In the region, these important topics related to education, values, and sustainability are still off the discussion tables. Right now, in Latin America, the political and power supremacy aspects continue to be dominant over these important social issues. The political realignments from right to left of their rearrangements inside the political parties and situation have been taking place in an important way. But beyond these movements, the countries that take important steps in economic and social development are those that preserve institutions, the institutionality, and achieve significant amounts of invest in education, as is the case of Chile and Uruguay. And just as it is built, it is also destroyed. Argentina and Bolivia are the example. And on the other hand, too, just as we are a step or two behind in education, values, and sustainability, we are also, in general, behind in banking issues. Although some actors and countries, such as Peru, Colombia, and Ecuador, have taken important steps to reach better levels in all ways, in digitalization, in ESG objectives, but especially all of this kind of institutions thinking about the real needs of the clients, what they want and need, not what the banks think they want. And also based on technology to reach clients and sectors that could not be reached before, taking advantage of the fact that technology advances day by day are cheaper, mobile phones, telcos infrastructure, and other technology tools and facilities, which is making it available to more and more people every day. in this context, and some financial institutions in LA have taken important steps in technological advance, applying advanced analytics, agile models, and very important, profound changes in their organizational structures. The transformations not only digital, since digital transformation is just one more pillar, as important one, but just one more pillar within the deep, comprehensive transformational processes that these institutions are carrying out. These comprehensive changes have to do with 4 things. First of all, sustainability, like gender and ESG matters, innovation, digitalization, customer centricity, and organizational cultures based on 2 things, values and persons. And the opportunities, what are? I see great opportunities for value-based institutions to be a real, impactful, and scalable transformational factor in 2 main senses. First of all, and maybe, like I said earlier, we are a very steps behind of many of yours. But first, tailored programs, initially on issues of equity and gender equality. In Latin America, we are very, very behind of many countries in the world. But those programs have concrete actions and are based in depth analytics that to be designed based on the characteristics of the segment, and the same concept for ESG products later. I'm hearing Gael, and I think in LA, a few of us are concerned about ESG matters, ESG subjects. We are in the supervivencia, in la supervivencia between political issues and the ESG matters and the environment. It is not important for many of us. But, okay, we must begin in something. And I think gender is a subject very important for us in the now and in the future. But ESG products as well be important for us. And the second sense is something that you know deeply, is to provide access to products suitable for each segment that we attend, promoting their responsible use, achieving financial health. It includes financial education and avoiding over-indebtedness, and subsequently allowing people to have surpluses that give them possibilities to decide consciously how use it responsible and thus achieve financial wellness. The 4 pillars of the financial inclusion: access, use, financial health, and financial wellness. That responsibility of going through these stages belongs to a financial institution based on values and translates into financial and digital inclusion. I am convinced.
Marcelo, I'm going to keep you to a little bit to time because yeah.
I left 2 lines.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah.
Just 2 lines. I'm convinced that these are the opportunities for value-based financial institutions in LA. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you so much, Jeff. So I think what's really important is that we start to see the patterns. And one of the things that people say is, while we pay attention to what's happening with the environment, the social challenges are really escalating in tandem with the challenges that we face in the environment. Charlotte, shall we pass the baton to you?
Thank you very much. I will start with a few words about the geopolitical situation following up on our meeting in New York. And from a European perspective, we still have a war in Europe. The Russian war against Ukraine had now been going on for 2 years, and it's so terrible. But we are also affected by the war in Gaza. That is also terrible, especially the way it affects the civilian population. But these wars also draw attention in our part of Europe, because we see some kind of strong polarization. When it comes to Gaza, we have strong polarization on both sides of the war. And in Denmark, in my very small bank, just a few weeks ago, we had a shitstorm on the social media because we couldn't make a money transfer to Gaza. And that was because of the rules and this AML regulation. But suddenly, my small bank was a target for a lot of hate who was caused by this polarization and because of the wars. In other parts of Europe, I also think that we see a strong political turning to the right. And unfortunately, that comes with an anti-democratic approach. I think it's a situation in quite a lot of countries in Europe. And in a few months, then we will have an election to the EU Parliament. And it might be a success for some of the parties on the right side of the political landscape. And if that happens, it will change the political environment in Europe, I guess. And if I turn the focus to the EU, then actually on the positive sides, I think it's very good with the focus on climate and this EU green taxonomy, who defines rules and regulations and demand reporting from companies in Europe when it comes to the carbon footprint. And it's also very positive that we have rules and definition when it comes to our investment products, so that we can define the degree of sustainability. And I think that is positive, even though it's not 100%. But on the negative side, that causes a lot of greenwashing, because I think that across Europe, a lot of banks will call themselves sustainable. And that will be a challenge for customers who would like to do green, sustainable investments, that it is difficult to figure out who is doing good and who is doing bad. Also when it comes to this fossil investment and all these big banks who do a lot of investment in the fossil industry. But looking forward, then I'm a little afraid that the focus in Europe will move away from sustainability into some kind of industrial policies. Because the EU wants to be independent, for example, from Russia and from China. And therefore, I fear that most of the focus in the EU will be moving from, for example, sustainability into supporting industries who can make EU independent from countries like Russia and China. And I think that's very sad. Also because not only the focus on sustainability, but also to develop a social taxonomy. I really hope that there would be focus on that looking forward, but I'm afraid that will be postponed. And then a few words about our core business environment. When we met in New York, we were still challenged by the interest rate level in Europe. For many years, we have had negative interest rates, but last year we put that behind us. But just a few years ago, in Denmark, you could have loan for housing with a negative interest rate. That's really challenging to run a bank in that environment. And it took us a lot of time to introduce negative interest rates on deposits, for example. And that meant that we had quite a few years with a very poor or bad results in our banks. But during the last year, the interest rate have increased, and these days, many banks in my country, in Denmark, but also across Europe, we are announcing very good results. In my own little bank, we just on Friday announced the best results in our bank's history. So that's very, very nice. Thank you. But of course, this high interest rate level also put pressure on many customers and investments. And I think that on the negative side, we will see that we will have a lot of losses caused by the high interest rate level. So to sum up, I think when I look at the situation in Europe, we are definitely at a crossroad. Many positive things is going on, but I'm a little worried, especially about the political environment, and I think that could be a little dangerous. Thank you.
Thank you. Very clear, Charlotte. Thank you. So Kwame, Ghana and you taking on Africa, I'm not sure.
Thank you and good morning. Good to listen to all my senior colleagues, the submissions that they have made. If we look back to yesterday, what we had, the impact of AI and technology, and what Gail has also presented to us from yesterday up to this morning, what is happening with climate change, the issues are very real. And in Ghana and in many parts of Africa, climate change is impacting negatively on the economics. And once that is happening, we as financial institutions and banks in the area of value-based banking, of course, their impact is significant. For instance, it's estimated that Ghana is going to lose about 40% of its cocoa production in the next 3 years. And Ghana is the second biggest world producer of cocoa beans in the world after Ivory Coast. So imagine if the cocoa production is going to go that low, what happens to all the chocolate that we have in Europe and the world? And for us, as Opportunity International Savings and Loans, or globally Opportunity International, we do a lot of agricultural financing. And you can imagine the impact of climate change on agricultural financing. As of last year, about 27% of our portfolio was in agriculture, with about 60% being in the area of cocoa. Now, with the climatic changes, due to the climate change issues, there's too much rainfall in some locations, or too less rainfall, too much sunshine somewhere, and too low sunshine. So these themes are beginning to appear even within our economics across Africa. And therefore, how do we sustain our operations and be able to advance value to these clients that we serve? Last year in Ghana, for instance, we have a dam that burst its banks because of too much rainfall. And this caused flooding downstream, going into about 4,000 estimated homes, impacting so many communities downstream. Farms got destroyed, houses got destroyed, facilities and people's investment got destroyed. So these issues are rare, and it's happening all over. But I think that the opportunities that exist for us is that with the ability of technology and AI, we should be able to predict some more better than in the past and be able to be more certain with the kind of products and services that we offer. And that's where I believe the opportunities exist. But of course, it needs to be done in a good regulatory environment. As has been said already, The regulatory landscape is changing. There's more emphasis on a strong corporate governance. There's more cost, even in corporate governance in many parts of Africa because of the creeping nature of regulation. And how we balance that with products and services that is able to serve the niche market that we have is where the opportunities exist. And I believe that we should not be alone. We should find the right collaborators and direct funding to the areas of great need, which is to mitigate the impact of the climate change issues, especially in Africa. Food security is also key. And for me, that is another piece that I want to leave with all of us. With the war in Europe may be far away, but a lot of African countries import grains and fertilizer from Ukraine and Europe. And once these wars are happening, it causes a dislocation within the supply chain, and therefore increasing food prices also happens in our part of the world. So our ability to direct funding to crop production, producing local food that satisfies the local economies, will be very good for us. And we believe that though we have estimated about 35% of our portfolio to be in ag, we can actually do more. And most African partners can also do more in this space. Thank you.
Thank you, Kwame. Paul, back over to you and to, I want to say South Asia, East Asia, Asia for the GABV.
Thank you, Tom. All my fellow panelists have given a perspective on what has changed after we met last in New York. So, giving a perspective on Asia Pacific regions, because it's very diverse and it's very large. So it will be a bit difficult, but I will try to give mostly based on India and South Asia perspective. So what has changed after we met in Europe, in New York last April, is main thing is that India has become the most populous nation in the world. So that is a big 1.42 billion people. So now both China and India have around 18% each of the world, constituting 36% of the world population. So, and we just heard Dr. Gale speaking about the biomass deficit which these regions are facing. So you can imagine the impact both sides. There is impact on population. One is the challenge of equitable development and per capita income. The other positive fact is that the growing young population, as Dr. Gale said, the young population gives hope when we stand at the crossroad. So for this region in Asia, that is a great hope. The growing young population is a hope. And when it comes to an inflation, it started declining in most of the regions, but interest rate remains high. We hope that by end of this year, interest rates will start declining. So there is a lot of competition among banks for raising liabilities in the market. So every bank increase the deposit rates. So there is very high competition to manage, to raise and manage the deposits. Another important change or the happening in the region is the elections. So already Bangladesh, Pakistan elections are over. India is going to election, the largest democracy in the world is going to election for within 2 years. So we are already in an election mode. And geopolitical tensions, the Ukraine-Russia war, this also has an impact on Asia. And again, the recent Israel-Hamas also has created geopolitical tensions, have created a little unrest, political unrest in the region. When it comes to ISAF Bank, one major thing happened is that in last November we went for an IPO, and the public listing of ISAF has happened. And for a value-based bank, the market, how the market, public market receive, it's very important. So there was a huge response for the IPO. 77 times it was oversubscribed. So I believe that it is a validation. Thank you. I strongly believe that it is a validation of the purpose and mission we follow as part of the value-based bank, and it is a motivation, and I'm sure it is a motivation for inspiration for all the value-based banks across the globe. And food security, energy security, and water security and shelter for all will continue to be the priorities and challenges for this region. We again, so I wanted to specially thank GABV board and the leadership team for selecting this theme, the world at a crossroads, and inviting Dr. Gail to speak to us. It is a really, it is a validation of what we believe and what we practice, because all these facts reveals that. Because we as a region, most of the countries in the region face these challenges of drinking water. So if so banks like us, we have started a loan product for water many years before. So these are all going to be the challenges. And in the Asia Pacific region, on the climate change side, most of the countries have a climate risk, and especially on the we're facing climate related natural disasters. Almost every year, most of the countries face that. So the rising sea levels, which is really affecting the people live in the coastal areas, the fishermen, the farmers. So in all these issues, mostly it is affected by the poor people. So that is another concern. So because we are also lending to the poor people. So most of our people, especially microfinance converted banks or microfinance focused banks, so they have a main focus on low income segments. So these assets are in risk when we have these type of climate related challenges. And across the region, there is a growing focus for ESG. That is, and most of the governments have started adopting reporting formats aligning to GRI and ESG performance. Even in Government of India has adopted a format of reporting, BRSR, Business Responsibility and Sustainability Reporting, aligning with the GRI, and mandated top 1,000 listed companies to report, and we have reporting in BRSR format voluntarily. So ISAF has also gone for its first ESG rating this year in 2023, and we got one of the best ratings, being the first rating. We got a 1 to 7 scale, we got 3, and we got a score of 71. The average, industry average is 59. And on the technological developments, as we heard yesterday, AI and big data and machine learning are impacting in all aspects of life, not only in banking, healthcare, agriculture, education, in all the fields. And being in India, many of the banks already started using AI and machine learning. And maybe the challenges for banks like us, value-based banks, the investments required in these technological areas is very, very challenging. But without making an investment, we cannot compete with other large banks in that area also. So that is my initial comments, Tom.
Thank you very much, Paul. So I think that what we see, and I'm going to go back to just the first thing that you said, Paul, is that this is a validation of the GABV's mission and purpose, that regardless of the size and the shape of the banks and the size of your regions, we see patterns that go across. We see common themes: climate justice, preserving institutions, equitable development, focus on security, shifts in values, a number of dimensions that really reinforce what it is that we need to continue to be focusing on. We have said we have time for questions, but we are up against time for coffee. So would you like questions or coffee? It sounds like coffee, probably. I think you can ask our colleagues questions at the break as well, and we're all going to be here for a couple of days to be able to immerse ourselves. But I think this is a very good connection between what Gail Giraud and what we heard yesterday about information and technology and what we hear today. Each of you, every time I hear you speak, I think, wow, we have such a blessed group of thoughtful leaders who are really doing the mission work out there. So I want to give a big thanks to our panel.